Why Georgia by John Mayer from the Any Given Thursday live DVD. This version differs somewhat from the album because it's got its own song in the intro. It's about 3.5 minutes long. It's a completely different song. People have been calling it portable because it matches an old lyric sheet that has much of the same words, but I've never heard this version. If anyone can dig that up, let me know. Post a link in the comments. So if you're here looking for the traditional version of Why Georgia, click the link below. We'll take you right to that. But if you want to learn portable, stick around. The easiest way to think about portable is its 3 chord positions, played like this. And the chords are, we have a C major here, around the 8th position. Now you see his thumb encroaching over the fretboard in the video, but that's just because he's standing up and it's for muting only, it's not played. The chords are all 3 notes, played with the thumb and first 2 fingers. So the fingering for this first C major chord is the 3rd finger is on D10, 2nd finger is on G9, and then the first finger is on B8. And then we move that up to the 10th position and get a D major. So C major, D major up 2 frets, and then the final chord is a B minor. And that is played down at the 3rd or 2nd position, depending on how you want to talk. And the fingering is all the same. This is what I call a tic-tac-toe or slash fingering. The fingers are stacked like that, one on each string, one down from each other. And this final B minor chord, the fingering is the 3rd finger on G4, 2nd finger on B3, 1st finger on E2. And as you'll notice, fingering is the same for all 3 of those chords. Very cool. Most people do the B minor up here. Those same notes can be found down at the nut. And it's probably more complicated to play that down there, which is why we find Mr. Mayer doing it. And that is the rhythm. Let's start a little slow toe tap. And I've got my pick sequestered away between my fingers for this because it's all finger picking in the first bunch of measures, and then later on we strum it. So the the fingers in use are the thumb for the lowest note, and then the 1st and 2nd fingers on the right hand for the notes underneath that. Let's get back to our toe tap, and we'll talk about some of the slapping. Now the slapping is kind of weird because it only occurs at the beginning on beats 2, 3, 4. No slaps. 2, 3, 4. I'll show you what I mean. Show you what I mean. Slap, 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 slap. So you see that they only occur on beats 2, 3, 4. Ba 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 ba. And that's an integral part of some of the bounciness that occurs in this tune. Let's try that slow one more time. No slap, 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 slap. So now it's time to look at all the connecting tissue between the chords and the slaps that make it sound the way it does. I'll play the measure 1 slow and then we'll point out the details. So measure 1 slow sounds like this. So I looped it a couple times. Let's chop it in half and just concentrate on the first half of measure 1. So that is, that we can remember. So we're doing our C major, and then our D major, and then coming up immediately with a slap. And I'm slapping with my thumb near the open G because I'm going to pop that muted. Our right hand does a lot of muting on all of these little pops. And then I'm following up with the B minor chord. And then my thumb pops the muted D string and then comes down with a slap. So slow. One more time. That's easy enough to remember. Now the second half of that measure sounds like this. It starts off with an open muted D pop, and then our C major chord, and then all 3 open strings that you were previously fretting. So take that C major and then lift off, pluck everything open, come down with a slap, do the C chord again, and then this muted rake on the A and D strings, the 5th and 4th strings. So let's put the whole thing together slow now. So the one of the hard things is that muted rake, and the speed at which Mayer does it is just comes with practice. So that's measure 1. Measure 2 and 3 and 4 are very much the same, but small little things get added to give it momentum. And he starts adding things in the first beat. So whereas the first beat of measure 1 was like this, just a C to a D with nothing in between, the first beat of measure 2 throws an open D in there, like this. And that changes up the rhythm quite a bit. And each time he goes to another measure, he throws something new in that first beat. Measure 3's first beat has this. The hell's that? That's an open 2-note chord. That's the open B and open G, and then followed up with the open D. So B and G plucked at the same time, and then D on its own. That's common, you'll hear that in later parts in the piece. And just these tiny little additions make it sound really cool. Let's go through measures 1 to 3 slow, and I'll throw those in the first beat of each measure. And you also see sometimes, just like we had the C and then the open 3 strings, back to the C, happens sometimes in the B minor. So watch the tab for those changes, and this is just an indication that every single measure of this is going to be different. So don't try and memorize them all. Take bits and pieces here and there and do with them as you will. Another nice thing he throws in a measure after this is some harmonics. So he's doing the C, and then with the first finger he's hitting the G harmonic at the 12th fret and the D harmonic at the 12th fret. So you can just make these minor changes, and it keeps adding to the piece and adding to the piece. Later on in the second half of the measure, you'll get more of those 2 open strings, one bass string things happening up here near the C chord. And don't forget the slaps. I hope I wasn't. Skipping ahead to measure 9, when the band comes in, he gives him a little nod and they start up. He does another variation worth mentioning, and that is from the C chord. He hits those 2 open strings after the C chord, the open B and the open G, and then he hits the D12. Basically with his thumb, he's plucking the first root note of the D chord before plucking the whole D chord. So that sounds like this. And he does that consistently for the next 4 measures until he starts singing. So it sounds like this. So once the singing starts up, some of the improvisations get out of hand. He malforms some of the chords, he changes the order of the chords, and it's not very repeatable. So I suggest for a bed track for the vocal, when he starts singing the "Pick me up from out of portable," just do the bed track from measure 17 onwards into the strumming part, and that'll probably be a good bass. So that sounds like this. And then he takes the pick out, and that's the that part there, and he starts strumming his way through the rest of it. So let's just do that generic part a bit slow. That's one of the new variations. When you get to the end of the measure, near that C chord, we have the C chord, open D, 2 C chords, and end off with 2 open Ds. Let's do that again. Another neat thing he does is, instead of going to the B minor, we go to the G major. And I think what's happening there is he's going for the B minor, but he's actually missing. He's going a string up and a fret up, and he's getting the G instead of the B minor. I'm not saying it's a mistake, it's an unintended chord. Because people seem to get really pissed when I say John makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. I made about 18 of them since we started this video. Before ending off with a nice, before switching to the pick for the strumming part.
Well, I hear we're having anything we want, we're having anything we want at all.
Measure 21 is when the strumming starts, and that opens up a big vegetable soup of new rhythms and different chord phrasings and orders and things like that. So I suggest you don't learn that note for note. Let's just go over a clean, generic, repeatable way to get through that part of the song. So measures 21, 22, 23, 24, they sound more or less like this. And then repeat. So the rhythm is da, 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 da. And we always end the measure with an upstroke because we always start with the down. So we either end with a upstroke or the downstroke is going to be a long note, so we have time to pull the whole arm up and go to the next one. And it's a constant strum. You'll see later on that it's just constant up and down. He's really controlling which chords come out by just applying pressure and comping on the fret hand. Sometimes you can add more chords, drums than you originally had. Another thing that we see sometimes is near the end when he opens it up a bit, he's ending on a lot of double A pumps. So what he's doing there is on the C chord, he's kind of muting everything. 6th string with the thumb, and then all the chord notes are muted, but this A rings. And listen for the very end, it sounds like this. Jumps out. Sometimes you can leave the bottom 2 off. And as you get lazier and looser, you start doing open chord strums between all your chord changes like this. And another thing we sometimes see is he'll go down to that G major instead. Halfway through the song, he kind of changes the order. He goes from the G major and then strums a lot on the D with that open A in between. And when he's up on this D, he's actually adding another note. He's using a D12 with his pinky. So it sounds like this. That's that part where he's like, just singing, playing whatever we feel. When it's traveling on a box with 18 wheels. Another neat thing he does is sometimes on the B minor, he'll actually strum that quite a bit and alternate between the open strings and the B minor. And there's occasionally times where he hits a weird chord out of sync, but he still manages to make it sound good. So he does that. He does a lot of just quiet muting in some of the quiet parts. In the falsetto. Do they want? I can do anything, anything. And when he ends off that whole part after how many minutes of this, you take your pick and you put it back between your fingers for the regular intro to Why Georgia. Measure 77 has us starting out the standard intro to Why Georgia. It sounds like this. Let's just go through it really slow. Point out what I'm doing. We're fretting a G chord for the most part. With our thumb we're hitting the low E3. Our second finger is on the B3. And our first finger is hovering over G2 to do a hammer on from the open G to the G2. So that's the first part. We have a slap after that. And then we grab the B3 and the open G. And then we come down to the A string, hit that open. Let's just do that. So low G here, our little 2-note hammer on, our slap, 2-note snatch here, and then the open A. After that we have a chord change. We're actually forming almost like a C slid up 2 frets. So instead of the C chord here, where you'd usually find it, slide that up 2 frets, and don't worry about your first finger fretting that B3 at this point because it's not played at this time. And that gives us a nice little 2-note chord that we're just going to hit the top end of, the fretted end of. So that's fretting with your third finger on A5 and your second finger on B4. So let's go from the top. So I pluck that with my thumb on first finger. After that, with my second finger, I hit the G, open G, a slap, and then I arpeggiate that. So my slap is kind of around the 5th fret. I'm able to hit with my thumb that note, first finger this note, and then the second finger, the open G. And then you kind of repeat that more or less. So, moving on to measure 78, when you hear measure 77, it sounds very much like the riff. Most people just take that and lather, rinse, repeat, and you can do that. But in this particular live version, there's small differences. He only plays it that way in measure 77 once, and after that, he does more of a fuller chord grab. He does this. A bit different. Instead of just grabbing the B3 and the G, he actually grabs the B3, the G, and the open D. So he goes, hammer on remains the same, but you can just see that it's a fuller chord. And then he does a slap, and then instead of grabbing that little 2-note chord, the B3 and the open G, he's grabbing the open G and the open D. So it gives a lower, kind of bassier feel to that. Very small. It only appears in the live version. I haven't really listened to the studio one all that much, but it's something you can be aware of and throw in. Or you can just pick one way and do that the same way each time. Let's just go over measure 78, which is repeated 3 times exactly the same for a change. So measure 78 sounds like this, low G. So for this, I'm actually taking all 3 of my first finger, second finger, third finger, and just pulling them all from the B3, open G, open D to that hammer on, and G2. Then we have the slap. And then instead of grabbing the B3 and the open G, I'm grabbing the 2 middle open strings, the G and the D. So after that, it's pretty much the same. Open A, and then that chord. So pick different fingers to do some of the clutching and grabbing for you. But that is what he usually repeats. Measure 79 to 82 are an example of how he kind of lays back a bit when he's singing. When he's doing the 2 things at once, he simplifies just slightly some of the playing parts. So measure 79 sounds like this. So it's a bit sparser. But we have this nice little rundown with the open D and the open A. Slap. Before going to that little 2-note chord, we hit a little light, high open G here, and then a slap, and we end with that chord. One more time, measure 79. So let's come pausing in some airiness for that. The measure that follows right after that 80 is very similar to the intro verse, so I won't spend too much time on that. 81, again, sparse. One more time. And again, we see that nice little descending with the open strings. And then measure 82. This is before going into that weird part, which I'll get to. That's a nice one. So after that 2-note chord, with our thumb we pluck that A5 again. Then with our first finger we get the open G, slap, and then the open A. So we're taking our hand off because we're going to be forming that crazy new chord in a minute. So a lot of these areas of the song, before those weird chord changes, he's not fretting anything, and it's an open string doing the heavy lifting. One more time, measure 82. Again, you don't have to do these smite variations. If you can do that as he's singing, the way this leg goes, you can really hit all kinds of notes, and they all sound good. It's really hard to make something sound bad there.
All afternoon, I'm just stuck inside the gloom.
Measures 83 and 84 are this part. And that gives some people problems, because when I've seen it played live, I see people go to that part and they just kind of hang on it and sing over it without playing, and then go right back into it. Or worse than that, they attempt that whole hammer-on chord thing, and then carry on like nothing ever happened. I didn't just screw that up. Or they strum through it. So it's a beautiful part, so it's not wasted. It's like taking a perfectly good Porsche 911 and driving it right into a brick wall, backing up, and then continuing on your journey like nothing ever happened. Let's look at that part and get it down right. So that chord is a neat one. It's like a C major 7th with no 5th and a 9th tacked on the top of it. And the fingering for that is, we have our second finger on A3, our first finger on D2, pinky on G4, and our third finger on B3. And let's just go through measure 83 slow. What we're starting off with is we have our thumb poised over the lowest note in the chord on the A3, and then our other fingers, 1, 2, and 3, are curled under the other fretted note. So we can really quickly alternate between the thumb, bass note, and then the finger, high part of the chord. That's the first thing we play. And then we have these chord hammer-ons before going back to the bass note. So that chord hammer-on is where we lift off the pinky, and then we use it to hammer on the D5 before going back to the root with our thumb. So from the top, that first bit is... It's hard to make that sound slow, but that's it. So you're going bum, that's the first part. So that chord hammer-on, we're just using the fingers that are hooked into each one of the ones we're fretting below. We pull all 3 fingers out, sound that chord. We're sounding these notes. And then with our pinky, we hammer on the D5, and then pull off to the D2, go back to the bass note. After that, we're doing some chord hammer-ons, like this. So So it's the same kind of thing. We're doing that. We're lifting our pinky off the G4 and we're doing the open portion of that chord. Hammering on to G4 with the pinky before going to the bass note. Bass note. And then the open chord. Slap, bass note. And then one final chord hammer on. The pinky on G4. Let's play the whole thing slow a couple times from the top. Measure 84 sounds like this. It's more of those hammer-on and pull-off chords. So we have the root note, and we have a pull-off with our pinky coming off the G4, and a slap, and then an unusual pinky fingering here on A5 before going back to that open chord. So the beginning of that. Now that pinky muting is unusual because you can actually get that note on the A5 as the open D. But that would mean lifting off the chord, and he doesn't do that. He's always got that chord pressed down, at least the bottom part of it, to do all that stuff he's doing. So from the top again. And after that we have a little rest, we have a little pause. We put it in there. There's no slap, just a pause before going into some more chord pull-offs. And then open chord, slap, and then open D and open A. Before going into the... Let's do that one more time slow, a couple times slow. Let's run 83 and 84 together and see how they sound like. Turbines to speed. Oops. And then back into the part of the verse. Another variation you can throw in is in measure 88. Sounds like this. So it starts off the same. But right when we get to that little two-note chord, we take our first finger and hit A2, open D, slap, and then A3, open D. It's a nice way to end it off, so you can throw that one in if you want. Measure 90 is another neat variation, and this is different going into that second iteration of that part. So the measure 90 sounds like this. Very neat. So instead of the two-note chord, we're just hitting the single A5, and then an open D with our first finger, and then we slip down after a little pause to the A2, an open D, and then open A before going into the next. One more time.
And leave this shit behind.
There's one thing I noticed about this song is that people love when John Mayer says shit. They lose their minds. The audience applause, big wave of it comes up when he says that. If you check out all the other different versions he has of this song, and he decides to throw that four-letter word in there, it's pretty neat, the crowd reaction. And people that cover it too, I kind of watch them. Is he going to do the shit version or the regular version? And you can see them get all excited when they get to that part. Shit! And they just put everything they have into it. It's really interesting. Measures 91 and 92 are a bit different the second time through. They sound like this. And one of the main differences in measure 91 is we have a double hammer-on. We're using our pinky to go from this open D2 and G2 to a D5 and a G5 within the constraints of the chord here. Like that. that. So let's take measure 91 slow. We have the bass note, top end of the chord with our pinky fretting the G4, bass note again. Lift off the pinky and do a double hammer-on with the bottom part of the chord, but we're going to use our pinky to sound the notes D5 and G5 like that. And then instead of pulling off, we're actually going to strike our notes on the D2 and the G2. So instead of going pulling off, we're going and then striking that last part of the note. If we're going back to the root note, then we have a double hammer on from the open part of the chord, double pinky to the D5 and the G5, and then we have the bass note, and then the open chord, slap, the bass note, and then the original hammer on to the G4 with our pinky, just a single one. So let's go through that slow. And another thing I should say, right in the middle there, I'll show you where I mean. Right here, this part, this open sound is a bit longer, and then the hammer-on is quick, and then you quickly get out of it and go to the bass note, and then finish off. I'll try to over-exaggerate that a bit. It's just that hammer-on, instead of going like this, it's you hold the initial note for a beat longer. Hopefully that came across. Now we'll measure 92, sounds like this. Very similar to the old one, except we don't have to fret that crazy thing on the A5. That's the main difference. It starts off the same, bass note. We have the pull off with the single note, pinky on the G4, and then lifting off, slap, and then the open part of the chord. And then we have a pause or rest, the bass note, and then another pull off, bass note, open, chord, and then slap, and then the open D and the open A. Let's do that slow a couple times. And both together slow. We're going to look at measure 94, which is where we transition from the finger picking into the strumming again. So measure 94 is the last measure before the chord. Sounds like this. That's all that is. So we're going from that traditional finger picking. At this point I do a chord and I strum with my finger. And then I switch to the pick for the next chord. And then there's two open strums using the top three strings to transition into the next set of chords into the chorus. So let's go over that slow. I'm going two middle strings open and then the A open. And the first chord we strike is this. And that E2 is optional, but it's there. It's kind of ringing in the background. We have our thumb on E3, low E3, muting the fifth string. Next two strings are open, and I have my third finger on B3 and my second finger on E2. Sounds like that. And then I transition to the pick, and the next chord is very similar to the first one. We're just moving the thumb from the third fret to the second fret, and then two open low-ended strums. One more time, slow. Into speed. You'll get good at flipping the pick in and out like that. So say hello to Mr. Pick.
Hi, I'm Mr. Pick.
Measures 95 to 101 are the pre-chorus, and there are a bunch of chords heavily strummed, starting off with an E minor 7th. So I've got my low E, my first finger's on A2, second finger's on D2, G's open, and we have B3. with the pinky, and the high E's open. And the rhythm is like this. So it's initial downstroke strum, reset, and you're going to do 5 strums here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with a long one, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, another long one, and then you're going to lift everything off and just strum the top 3 notes here, and that just is him transitioning from this chord to the next one. So from the top, measure 95. So think of that. First one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. That goes into the next measure, which is a D with an F sharp in the bass. So we have our thumb on E2, we have our second finger on G2, and our third finger on B3. And the high E can ring if you want. And the rhythm for that is similar, but the last end of it is a bit different. So we have an initial downstroke, reset, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 1, 2. One more time. And like I said before, everything is going to have these open transition ones. After that, we go to a G minor 7th, which we saw in that measure 94. We have our thumb on the low E3, muting the 5th string. Next to our open, our third finger is on B3, and our second finger is on E2. Very nice. Sounds like this. Small difference at the end, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, group of 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's straight strumming with some accents near the end. And that takes us to the next measure which has a C chord. Everyone knows how to do a C chord. So we do the C chord with a downstroke, and as we reset for another downstroke, we lift off the first finger and second finger. So the C has his fretting third finger on A3, second finger on D2, G is open, and then the first finger is on B1. We're going to lift off that B1 and that D2, so it goes from to this. We're going to strum it in the fall, and we're going to put it back on later. But for now, start with the C. Lift the top 2 off. Put it back on. So it sounds like this. Very nice. You see him doing that a lot in this song. And those are the first 4 measures of the pre-chorus. Let's put them all together. Measure 99 is the same as measure 95. 2 groups of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the D with the F sharp is a bit different this time around. So that's a chord down, group of 3, 1, 2, 3, another group of 3, 1, 2, 3, and then the open transition. So sounds kind of neat. So for the final chord, we have the G minor 7th, and we transition that into like an A with a D in it. So we're barring with the first finger on D2 all the way down, third finger on B3, high E's muted. Let's just play through that slow measure 101. And there's an audible chord change you hear. And then we lift the second finger off. We hear the high E sound a couple times as we transition into that A with the D. Leave it off, and then the 2 open transition notes. let's try the whole thing together. So you notice that I missed a couple of the accents. Don't play this exactly right. You can, as long as you get the math right, you get the amount of strums in there. Like you can have an alternate ending to that. Or as long as you get the math right and the amount of strums. If you throw more strums in, you're going to be doing the note values a bit faster. If you're just having one, you're going to let them hang in the air. Or measure 102 is the first measure of the chorus. Sounds like this. So we have the D chord. We have the open D, second finger on G2, third finger on B3, and then the high E is open. We do 3 downstrokes, and then an upstroke, and then we lift everything off and we do a downstroke, upstroke using the 2 open middle strings before transitioning to an A chord. Simple bar with the first finger. We do another downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, then we do an upstroke open. We do that G major 7th-ish chord. So let's do that slow. One more time. Measure 103 has that chord ringing. And so pay particular attention to the direction of the up and down strokes here. So with that ringing, we do a down, down, up, down, 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 up for transitioning. So ringing. Let's take the first 2 measures, put them together. And slow. 104 is similar to that first starting measure on the D here. We have 3 downstrokes to start off. But we don't lead we don't finish with the next chord in the next measure like we did in that G major 7th. So it's 1. So we're strumming on that A right until the last bit. And then measure 105 is the E7 chord. A little bit different rhythm there. So that's down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So let's do the whole thing from the top. Measures 106 and 107 are exactly the same as the beginning of the chorus, so we can just play that. But measure 108 and 109 to end the chorus off are pretty different. They sound like this. And this is where my tab is going to differ a bit from the other ones out there or other live players you see playing this. That's because when someone showed me how to play this, I didn't really listen to the song before playing it. Just someone showed me. They were doing this instead of. So this is fine, but it's pretty thin sounding. And I really like this live. So I'm going to show you that way, and hopefully this will start popping up in people's performances of it, because it's a really nicer way to do it. We have our thumb on the first fret of the E string, Our third finger is on A3, pinky is on D3, G is open, and then our first finger is on the B1. And the high E can be open, but it's not really played here, but if you hit by accident, it'll sound good. And the rhythm for measure 108 is this: a downstroke, and then an upstroke, downstroke, and then we lift off our first finger on the B1 and do a downstroke with all those wonderful open strings, and then we have an up, down, 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 up. So we're only fretting that for the first 3 strums. And then lift off. Then we go into the next measure. We put everything back. And in addition to that, we take our second finger and fret the G2. So we've got a G major chord at this point. But we don't do it for long. We go down on that chord. We lift off the G2. And then put it back. Open or muted strumming, and then C. And that ends it off. So let's do that again slow. It's like... I'm doing muting in between those, but you can also do open strings. Let's play the whole thing from the top, slow. And that is the chorus. Chorus 1. Measure 110 is the second verse, and the second verse does not use the finger-picked stuff at all. It's all strummy, and some of it quite aggressive. So the strumming part sounds like this. Our thumb on the E3, muting the 5th string. These next 2 strings are open, and my second finger is on B3 and high E3. And we're concentrating on the lower part of the strings, and then lifting the chord off, hitting an open upstroke, downstroke, before settling in on this chord. And that chord is a C chord, slid up 2 frets. So I got my third finger on A5, second finger is on D4, and then my first finger is on B3. And on that second chord, we're doing a downstroke on the low part, upstroke on the high part, and lifting off. Open strings for the transition back to the beginning of that. And you can add some muted kind of shucking with the right hand. And as he starts singing, you can lighten up a bit. What's important is lifting off the whole chord to get those open downstroke, upstroke strums in transition. And when you're taking off of this one, those are very important. You sometimes see the electric guitar is playing this kind of line. I sometimes see acoustic players that are finger players only struggle with that. They kind of take their thumb and first finger and make it into like a pick. But because we're doing it the right way, we have the pick sequestered away here. Pop it out, use it. You do some muting. So you can bop between the electric part and the acoustic part if you want. Keep in mind that he's doing this with a full band on a stage with 2 guitarists, full bass and everything. So when he gets crazy on the strumming, the sound guy probably just turns him down a bit so he's more rhythmic than the notes popping out. So if you're doing this solo, you don't have to go as crazy as he's going. Measures 115 and 116, also different. That's this part earlier. Instead, he forms that chord, and he strums the hell out of it, like this. Before going back into the... So let's form that chord up, and there's one, sometimes he just strums the chord up and down 16 times, and that's all. But other times he'll actually have these little melodies like in the middle of the chord. So he's just kind of lifting fingers off and hammering them on other ones in the middle of the strumming. So that's one thing he does in measure 115 that we'll go over. So we start off with the regular chord form. Get ready to lift your pinky off. Off. And then put your pinky on the D5. And that finishes out that. That's all we do there. And then the measure after that, measure 116, he kind of just hammers on and lifts off that pinky from the G4, leaving it open to the D2, like. So you can think of, but just do that in the context of the chord strumming. So I'm not showing you exactly what he's doing there because he does it different every time, but that's some of your options. You can have a nice rundown, or you can just lift off that pinky, or you can just strum the whole chord straight all the way through, which is what he does later on. You'll see him live. He's making these really quick, just like a machine gun. So that part's not as interesting in the second and third verses. Pre-chorus 2 starts at measure 123, and it is also heavily strummed. For the most part, it's 16 strums per measure, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, straight like this, with transitional open, no chords in between the chord changes. So it's like this. And that's a new chord. That is probably what most people play in the pre-chorus all the time. That is a C with a D popped in the bottom. So I'm using my second finger at A3, first finger at D2. Everything here is open, G open, and then my third finger is on the B3. And down, up, and then we start the whole thing over again. And that last part, we do 6 strums on this one. And then, and because it's so close to the next chord we're about to play, we don't have a open transition thing. So let's try that one more time. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So 4 groups of 4, but at the very end you have these transitional ones. One more time. Chorus 2 starts at measure 130, and it's a strummy version of the chord changes we've already seen. So that first part, we have 6 strums on the D chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 open strums, and then 4 on the A. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 open strums, and then that leading G major 7, and up and down on that. So slow. That's measure 130. After that, we stay where we are and we do 16 strums of this, except take out 2 for the last chord change. Because every chord change we have the 2 open strings. Then we start over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A bit different because we don't lead into this chord. Start all over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that very last time we play the G major 7, we throw in that measures 136, 137, and this part off. They sound like this. Do them slow, similar to what we saw already. Measure 130, 36. So we start off by fretting our first finger on the B1. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then open. Immediately after that, we have a little quiet downstroke. Get that in there, it's a nice little dynamic. And then the last part is similar to what we did before. So that's a full F major here. And we're lifting off our second finger from the G2, putting it back on, muted strum, up, down, sorry, down, up, and then the C, and then a double C, and then the open.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beham Choir.
Measures 138 and 139 are just before the bridge, and they sound like this. Simple enough. For measure 138, we play 8 downstrokes on the G chord, and we fret that with our thumb. We mute the 5th string. The next 2 are open, and with my first finger, I'm on B3 and E3, and just 8 notes for the whole measure. 8. After that, we take our second finger and we fret D4, and that ends up muting the open G string. It sounds like this. We're going to do that 4 times before lifting off and just doing the same thing we did before for the last 4 strums. So those are all 8 notes. Now, one thing I do sometimes coming out of the last chord, which was a C, I'll slide in and end up mistakenly using my second finger here for the bar down low. That makes it really hard and awkward to do that. Just try it, see what I mean? So if I notice that I'm doing this, and look down, I'll slide my first finger in behind there when I'm not strumming. Another thing some people do is they ride that D4 and they'll fret with their 3rd finger D5. That sounds like this. Bit of a different sound. Now I don't hear this on the track and I don't see his fingers in the video portion. I hear this open D after. So you're free to pick away and do it whatever way you want. We're now at my favorite part of the song, measures 140 to 143, the bridge. They sound like this. Let's just run through the first 2 measures. And I call these sting chords because it's the same interval as the chords used in Message in a Bottle by the Police. And let's look at the first chord. We take our first finger, we put it on the E1, low E1, second finger on the A3, pinky on the D5. You can substitute your 3rd finger for the A3 if you want. And some people approach these and fret them like they're those rhythmic shuffle chords, like, and they only kind of put the pinky on when it's needed. I prefer to just anchor them all in there and just leave them there forever. So the rhythm we have in measure 140, it's 3 downstrokes, 4 downstrokes, 1 upstroke, and then the rest are all downstrokes. So we'll go over it slow. It starts off with a muted thunk, and then we have a downstroke on the bottom 2 notes. And we have a downstroke on the next 2 fretted notes on the A and D string. Then we go back down to that low note, and we have an upstroke here, followed by another thunk, muted thunk. And then we take that chord, we take it down a string. So our root is now going to be on A1, and everything else just falls into place. So the same shape, just down a string. And we hit the bottom 2 fretted notes of that with the downstroke. And then we do like a full kind of strum, and then back down to the lower 2 fretted notes. And what happens in that big full strum one is that when you're doing this chord, your first finger happens to bar the high E1, and if you can make that sound, then great. If you can't, don't worry about it. I think it's just a coincidence. One more time. Measure 141 sounds like this. And what we've done is we've slid that chord up, and now our root is on the A3. And we start with a muted downstroke and upstroke, and then we have a downstroke on the low portion of the chord. Then we hit that full chord, back to the low part. And like before, we're kind of barring that high E3. So if you can make that sound good, if not, it's not that important. And then we slide the chord back down, and in between us doing that, we're doing another muted downstroke and a muted upstroke. And then we hit the low portion of it, and then the high portion, and then a double pump kind of on the A1 downstroke, and then upstroke like that. So that part's slow. I like to keep track of where the 16th notes are. That's the 2 muted fast strums. The fast notes are the 16th notes. The slower ones are the 8th notes. So just like that. So as long as you can kind of keep track of where those are, you can remember the rhythm. Measure 142 is a repetition of the first measure with a slightly different rhythm. Sounds like this. It starts off with a muted thunk, and as we're coming up with an upstroke, we're actually sounding this B1. Now that just happens by accident. You don't have to do that. If you don't sound it, you can just count it as a muted downstroke and upstroke. And then we go back to the familiar thing we've been doing. And it's all downstrokes after that, after those first 2 16th notes. Just like that. Measure 143 ends that all off. Sounds like this. So we're in the 3rd position, the A3. We start off with a down, up, muted stroke. Then we do the low part of the chord, the A3. And then downstroke on the whole chord, back to the low part. Then we have a muted strum down, and we're sliding down to the 1st position again on the A1. And as we come up, we hit that A1 note along with some muted strings around that. And then we go down on the A note, up on the A note. We did it 3 times. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then we do a full chord. And then we left everything off except the A note. And it sounds pretty bad, slow and on its own, but that's what's going on. So I'll play that slow. So the thing I like to keep track of here is that part there near the tail end of the measure. So from the top slow. Now the whole thing together. The bridge continues into measure 144, where we have this going on. And that's our standard G with the muted 5th string. And the rhythm is... What we're doing there is we're just bending over with the thumb and fretting the A3. So the first half of the measure starts with, and the latter half ends with. I don't know why he frets it this way, he just does. So again, that's... And you hear the distinct change from the root note to the root note. So after that, the G on the E3 is muted somewhat. After that, we're doing a C chord slid up 2 frets. And then we go back to that thumb on the A3. Then we play it one more time. Before going into some beautiful chords. And that is an E minor 7th. Everyone's familiar with that. So that's the first finger is barring the 7th fret on the A7 all the way down. Then we have our third finger on D9 and our second finger on B8. The next one is a D sus2. We're barring with our first finger on the the A5, which is the D note. And we have our third finger on D7 and pinky on G7. Everything else is open. Down here we got an I don't know what. We have our second finger on the A3. We have our first finger on the D1. Our third finger is on G3, pinky's on B3. I don't know what that is. And after that we have this F-ish type thing. We have our thumb on E1. Third finger on D3, G is open, and then the first finger is on B1. Very nice changes here. That's like, when I say lying down. Let's do that from the top. Measure 150, we get into a reprise of that portable theme. I'm not going to get into it too much because we've heard it a lot already. You can do this kind of thing. So a lot of double pumping on the open A. Near the end of this, he starts strumming more on that C near the end. So a lot of loose chording, a lot of open strums. And he kind of hangs down near the B minor. Near the end. That's how he ends off that part and gets back into the song where he's singing a cappella. And that's just a G. And then with our second finger, we're hitting the D4. And that's that thing where it's like, everybody's just a stranger, blah, blah, blah.
That's the danger. Going now.
Measure 166 has us coming out of the a cappella part with John strumming away in this G, slowly at first and then speeding up. So we have 4 downstrokes and then 8 strums up and down. And then we go to that C major 7 with the 9th in it from the pre-chorus. And we start off with the pinky on the G4, but then we lift it off halfway through that measure and we do a whole measure just strumming it with it off after that. So that sounds like this. Then we're into a bit of the verse. We're doing the pre-chorus, but with a different rhythm and singing different words over it. Measure 171 is the everything happens for a reason part that's sung over the pre-chorus chord. It's almost a different feel to the song at this point. And you can tell we go right into the chorus from that point. So the only thing we do different there is we hang on to that A-ish chord with the D in it. Two measures of that before we go into the last chorus, which is very similar to chorus number 2.
If I'm living it right, and I live it right, why don't you run?
Then in measure 177, after the third chorus, to end it off, we're doing our F shape here. We're lifting off that second finger off of the G2, alternating back and forth, and we do this to end it off. That was the F to the C, finally to the G. And just when you think the song's over, you hear him whittling away in the background. And all he's doing is arpeggiating a couple of these strings, starting with the B3, and then the open G and the open D. And after that we have the open E, and then the fretted B3, and then the G. And he just starts going between the second fret of the high E and the fifth fret of the high E. And then he finally goes, yeah! And the song's officially over. You don't even hear that part in the video. When I was listening to a FLAC lossless version of the audio, I picked that up near the end, but it's there. Hope you enjoyed it. And some of you will be happy to hear that this is the last tutorial with this guitar, because I've got my new one in hand, and the very next video title feature that. So say goodbye to Nicodemus. Had her for many, many years. And she's been through a lot, but it's time to retire. Hello there, people. Since I was into the video editing it for a huge typo I made in the title, Thursday and Tuesday are 2 different days, sorry about that. I thought I would throw this on the end to just go over a little thing that's popped up in the comments on day 1 and I was worried it was going to happen. That's got to do with the incorrect use of a G major in this chord sequence, the first bit of portable. That's with the G. And this is the actual recording. So you hear that it doesn't sound the same. Yeah, it's lower. It's major. There's a lot wrong with it. A lot of people also like to tack this low note onto all of the chords because they see him doing what they assume is a broom handle grip. It is, but it's just for muting purposes. So we don't have all this bass in that. So if we play the original recording, it's just the high part of each chord, just the top 3 notes. No bass notes at all. In fact, if you look through the whole transcription, there are no bass notes at all on the 6th string. You know, there might be 1 or 2 when he gets into the strumming part, but his thumb is around the area of the 5th fret to do all this muted raking and popping and stuff. Sometimes it's on the A, never here. So let's fix that up and throw that back into the B minor. And then that would sound like this. Let's try and drop this waveform right on top of that and see how they sound together. This is something I do when I'm transcribing to make sure I've got the rhythm and the note value is right. So for fun, if I change that to a G and play it over top, you'll hear that it almost sounds harmonized because it's a totally different chord. Anyways, here's one way of looking at that. We can chime this G, and then we can chime that B minor. And then you kind of pick for yourself which one. And then this is. You just hear the different tonality. So in my ear, it is not major, major, major. It's major, major, minor. The intervals are quite clear to my ear. And if you don't believe that, what we've done is by isolating the waveform itself, the transcribe program, which is one of the reasons I love it, has decided to make note value guesses. So here we have string 3 fret 4, string 3 fret 4. Next one is string 2 fret 3, string 2 fret 3, and what do you think this one's going to be? String 1 fret 2. There we go. So even the computer agrees with me. These notes up here are screaming girls, so we discount those because I don't think anyone's fretting, the first string on the 7th fret. So it's quite obvious to me to be a B minor, and like I said before, the eyes can be fooled. The ear is a better test of what's really going on. So if you want to play it the way he played it in that day, don't throw a G there. G's occasionally make their way down in there because he just, picks the wrong chord from time to time, and it still sounds good. But the overall tonality is a major, major, minor chord progression. And if anyone disagrees with me, do a little video. Show me why you disagree with the transcribe program and me, because, it's that's what makes music interesting. And I hope I'm not harping too much on it. It's just I like to know what he does instead of guessing at it.